Communion.
The question was, would Matthew have had a job? Yes.
Matthew.
Yeah, Matthew.
Oh, I remember him.
Yeah. Would Matthew have had a job? Yes. You have most of the people in the early first century church, they had other jobs. Paul was famously called himself a tent maker, and that was the work he did. He sewed together tents and sold them to people. That was his job. That was his day job. And then in the afternoon and evening, he's out preaching.
He did a different kind of tent.
Different kind of tent. Yeah. So yes, Matthew would have had a job. I don't know what his job was, but he would have had a way of making income for himself. And then he also would have had he would have had some patrons who, paid him to take some of his time and write out, the gospel that he was writing.
So would he be, like you are considered employed here, you come here, you preach here, and that sort of stuff. He didn't necessarily belong to a church, or would he be like a journalist that would just throw stuff out there for people to read, or?
He probably, I'm sure he had I'm sure he was part of the worshiping community. I think he was part of the worshiping community in Antioch, at Alexandria. Yes. And John, of course, he even while he's writing his gospel, he's shepherding people in Ephesus. And he's going not very far away, but bringing people into his church in Ephesus.
So, like we've discussed before, in Matthew in his times, could the people read?
I think people, one of the things we're starting to discover, the more and more archaeological finds we have, and the more work that we do, we're finding that people were more literate than we thought for the majority of the last 2,000 years. What we have found archaeologically is we found people who took shards of clay and they scratched out their shopping lists on it.
Huh.
Yeah. We're finding shopping lists. We're finding documents that were written on slate and so forth. And people had more access than we once thought was even possible. So yes, people were, I think, I'd go out of line, but I think the majority of first century folks in the Middle East were more literate than 19th century Americans. Yeah.
Oh, that's a huge statement.
Yes, it is a huge statement. But I think they were, by and large. And I say that because one of the interesting things that happened in history is that in the Middle Ages we became the Western world became further and further separated from some of the great minds of Rome and Greece and so forth. Nobody had heard of Aristotle until the 12th century when Averroes, who was a Spanish missionary, brought Aristotle to the Western world. And that was 12th century. So that's 1,200 years that nobody even heard of Aristotle, let alone read him. And so, that's the Western world became less and less literate instead of becoming more and more literate, which is what Christianity was all about. Originally, if you wanted to be a Christian, you were signing up for a 3-year course of study so you could learn to read before you learned to read the Bible and before you took your vows of baptism, so that you were prepared to understand what you were doing. So I can't imagine a church that would today say, sure, you can join the church, give us 3 years, and then you can join. It's like, well, I don't think so. I don't think so.
I'm gonna go find one of those cookies.
Yeah. So there you go.
So looking at, this is a Dutch painting, isn't it?
No, it's Italian Renaissance, Caravaggio.
Okay.
Caravaggio,
Oh, yes, okay.
yeah.
So, looking at that and thinking about the times of Matthew, St. Matthew, they weren't dressed like that. And
No, no.
We see all this, we see this, everything, we are watching these
16th century
series now
dress.
that are, there's the one about the saints and everything else. I mean, those people, they, you can see the seams in their clothes and you can see, clothing like we wear.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Maybe
No,
they're
no,
trying to
and
make
so-
it
So
work.
Caravaggio
It's not
dressed
hard.
these people up like
Yeah, they're,
Italians in 1600.
yeah.
Maybe trying to make
In
it
his
more
time.
real for people and bringing it into their own
Precisely.
culture.
That's precisely, that's exactly what Caravaggio has in mind. He says, I don't want you to go into the past, I want you to see how this
Right.
story is real today. The calling of Matthew. And he's a Renaissance person. You can see a hint of a halo above Jesus. Right there, that little line.
Oh.
Just the hint of a halo.
Yeah.
But it's the light that shines on the room, and it shines from Jesus inward.
And he-
Okay?
Jesus looks Italian too.
And there's his hand.
He doesn't have blonde hair and blue eyes.
He does not have blonde hair and blue eyes, but he does look like a pretty good Italian. His fingers are lit up. Here's Matthew ducking, surrounded by his tax collector's coins, and everybody else in the room, this guy, and they're all saying, him? You want him? This is the one? I think you got this wrong.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
one guy's pointing right at his head. What the heck?
Oh, I thought he was doing a pick him, don't pick me.
Okay, well, yeah, that's not a bad interpretation either. Please, not me, but yeah,
you're
him.
talking
Yeah.
about picking stuff.
Yeah. No, I'm not Matthew, he is.
Yeah. Don't point at me.
Yes. Just take a minute for a second, then we'll get back to Matthew. On the third page, I wrote down here especially for Paul, the understanding of authorities in the early church. These the first I quote Mark 6:3. Where Jesus is in Nazareth, and he gives a sermon to the people of Nazareth, and they are actually offended by it, and their response is in the crowd to say, "Is not this the teknon?" Which once upon a time we translated as carpenter, but now that we have more information about language, we understand that was a name for a day laborer, somebody who, yes, would have been one day hammering nails and building buildings, and the next day would have been digging ditches, and the next day would have been stacking bricks, whatever. Is this not the teknon, the son of Mary, and the brother of James and Joses and Judas and Simon, and are not his sisters here with us? Now Mark writes that for two reasons. One, to let us know Jesus had brothers and sisters, but secondly, because Mark knows these four guys by name: James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon. Those guys are going around to these informal gatherings, and they're telling the story of Jesus from their point of view. They are teaching others about their brother, Jesus. And they would have drawn huge crowds, Hey, the brother of Jesus is in town. Let's go. Let's hear what's going on. And it would have been largely word of mouth. They didn't have spotlights and confetti, but would have been word of mouth. And these names that show up in the New Testament, they're telling us, these are the footnotes. These are my sources. Mark's telling us, the story I'm telling you, these four guys, they're my sources, along with others, but I've named them here so you can check my sources. They didn't have an iPhone to say, oh, let me check and see if that's really true. You know, but these names were the authorities, okay? And then you get another thing here in Luke. Luke tells us a different story. There were 12 with him, Jesus, as well as some women who had been cured of evil spirits and infirmities. Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had gone out, and Joanna, the wife of Herod's steward, and Chuza, and Susanna, and many others who provided for them out of their resources. That's Luke's footnotes. He has talked to Mary, he's talked to Joanna, he's talked to Susanna, he has probably also talked to Chuza, who is also named there to say he's an authority on the life of Christ. His life touched the life of Christ. So when we read those names, the common theory at the beginning of the 20th century was that those names were just made up by the gospel writers. But it's interesting that since that time, since about 1970, scholars have been going back over especially 1st and 2nd century documents. And we are finding these names that were in Scripture as being listed as people who were teachers in the Christian community, including Chuza. You know, we thought, what an obscure name, what the heck? But there he is in 1st century documents, 2nd century documents, Chuza. They were listening to these people. The high priest's slave had his right ear cut off by Peter. His name was Malchus. Okay, that's just not, for trivial pursuit.
It's good for
Yeah, Malchus was testifying. Yeah, Peter cut off my ear and Jesus healed it. I'll tell you all about it. So these are the authorities, these names. They compelled the passerby to carry his cross. It was Simon the Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. Well, why does he name Alexander and Rufus? Because they're telling their dad's story. Their dad has died and they're carrying it on.
That's another way to check it.
Yes,
Did
that's
that
right.
man have children named this?
Yes, that's right. And Mark's telling us, I know these names because I know these guys. I've sat down with Alexander and Rufus, and these are my sources for writing this stuff. So yeah, this is so nobody can charge them with plagiarism. This is their authorities.
Or writing a novel.
Yes, that's right. And today, today we fill all this stuff up with. With footnotes at the end, right? Just pages and pages of footnotes. But they wrote their footnotes right in the body of what they're writing.
It's kind of almost like the reverse Seinfeld thing when they talk about the third person. You never get the first person. You always get somebody said that somebody said that somebody said.
That's right. But they're naming the names so that you can, at least in the 1st century, they can follow them up. They can actually look for Alexander and Rufus.
But you believe Jesus actually had brothers?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely.
And sisters.
Well, one of the classes we've had, I can't remember, they said, there's just different schools of thought.
There are, yes. Three
What did
different
they
schools of
say
thought.
about those scriptures that you just read? They said he didn't have any siblings and Mary was a virgin for her entire life, which is ridiculous.
Well,
I'm sorry, it's ridiculous.
well, the Eastern Orthodox Church says that those brothers were stepbrothers,
Oh, please.
and that
Oh yeah, that Joseph was older.
that they were mothered by Mary's sister, and when she died, Joseph, who was already an old guy, he took Mary into his family the way the Levirate law would suggest. Joseph has died. his wife has died, therefore he can take Mary as his wife just to take care of the household. And James, Joseph, and those guys were his stepbrothers, brothers by a different mother. Okay?
Okay.
The Catholic Church says they were cousins. Now, and that they were children again of another sister of Mary, and so they were all just cousins. That's what Jerome argued.
And what does the Presbyterian Church say?
Well, Reformers followed the fourth century teacher whose name is not embedded in my memory, but as soon as I look it up, I'll get it. I'll know it. But Eutyches or something like that. Don't quote me. In the fourth century, he just said, look, the Greek language has perfectly good names for stepbrothers. And if you wanted to say they were stepbrothers, why wouldn't you write that?
Yep.
And the Greek and Latin have perfectly good names for the word cousins. And if that's what they were, why didn't they use those names? Instead, they used the name filials, brothers.
And sisters.
And sisters.
And sisters, yes. And we know his sisters, yes. So, yeah, so using Occam's razor, the shortest distance between 2 points is the one that is most reasonable. It makes sense. And, they would argue, look, Sarah gave birth to Isaac, but she wasn't done giving birth. There were other brothers to Isaac, but Isaac was the chosen one. And so just like Abraham, had a special child, but he had all these other kids too. So Jesus, Mary gave birth to Jesus. And again, why call him the firstborn son if he doesn't have a second or a third or a fourth one?
Mhm.
So did they do this because of households?
Well, you mean why did they come to these other conclusions?
Yeah, why did they, yeah.
Because in popular culture, already in the 2nd century, there were these ideas kicking around about the perpetual virginity of Mary. Again, that theory was full of holes. And by the 6th century, they really kind of more or less dropped it. Because, look, the problem is, if there's a perpetual virginity of Mary, then Mary's mother's got to be a virgin. And it's Anna.
Oh,
And so the
that's
Catholic Church said, yeah, Anna was a virgin too. And then what about Anna's mother? Was she a virgin? And going back and back and back and back and back. And it's like, oh, never mind. We're going to stop the line at Anna. It may not make sense, but that's what we're doing.
Okay.
Because they said so.
Yeah. Yes, that's the answer. Because we said so.
Mary's a teenager when she has Jesus.
No doubt.
And Joseph, bless his heart, listened to the angel, didn't divorce her, stay with her, but then he just has to be celibate the rest of his life. And her too. That's just insane. Doesn't make any sense at all. It's reasonable that he would have siblings.
Right. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. It was. I mean, yeah.
Well, if Joseph was so old.
He's not.
Only
In his household. Been not been able to procreate.
Oh, only in these two stories is Joseph old. And in all of our creches. And in all of our creches. We all think that, we've been handed those creches where Joseph has a white beard and, he's kind of bent over a little bit and he can barely keep up with the donkey. Common marriage that happened between men and women in the 1st century was, yes, girls were at 13 betrothed, And their mother taught them how to run a house so that they could then be fully married by the time they were 14 or 15.
Kind of sick. That was
Young men at 18, 19, 20 were apprenticed to other people who taught them a trade. And so that they could work on creating a dowry to give to Mary's dad. And so he's got to pay Mary's father a little bit of money so they can go off. And yes, what Matthew describes is the most realistic story, where he says to Mary, come to my house. Let's stop this rumor right where it is. Come live with me. They did not have the kind of weddings we have. They didn't, the only way you had a great big wedding for the whole city was if you were really rich. And your daughter was like, walked on water.
Wait a minute.
Or was really ugly.
What? So most weddings were very small affairs. You got the family together, everybody raised a toast, you ate a nice meal, and then you took your bride to your new house. And everybody said, bless you.
Shalom, mazel tov. Go be married now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Still kind of what we do, but that part anyway.
Sounds like
Yes,
a
it is.
good plan.
But first we have to spend $25,000.
Oh,
Yeah. So, yeah. Anyway. And then the last thing I put down here was this Haflat Samar, these community gatherings, which were formal settings where people passed on oral tradition. And they are still around today in Egypt, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Israel, in Jordan. These groups get together. They aren't usually in the cities. They are in the villages and the surrounding communities where people get together and they share their history. When the war in Lebanon was going on in the 1980s, there was Haflat Samar, where people gathered to actually find out the truth of how the war was going, because they could not trust their government and they could not trust their army. So they gathered in these communities together and said, what have you heard? What do you know? What is true? And what is false?
That rings true today.
Yeah.
And you bet that there are people in Minneapolis gathering in Haflat Samars today.
Yes.
yes.
And they're saying, here's what's true and here's what's not true. And that's what's happening. So
But do you have time to actually distinguish the truth? Because what we get now are 10-second snippets.
yes.
And you're supposed to draw your total conclusion on that 10 seconds that you saw, not anything leading up to it, not anything.
I know.
So if you're
These
telling,
groups they would spend hours with one another.
we don't do that anymore.
No, we don't. We don't. We expect the truth in, like you say, 10 minutes, 10-second sound bites. And but we too, we have to read between the lines to get to the truth. The chief of police says that the federal authorities won't tell me what's happening. Okay? That's a huge clue. That's a huge clue.
Yeah, that's not how it usually goes. They work together normally, and that's not what's happening.
No, that happens when somebody wants to hold back the truth.
That's exactly right.
And that's what made Haflat Samar so important as an authority about the Gospels. Because it was, in these communities of people that these stories circulated, and they began to ferret out what's really Jesus and what's really not, and what will we place our faith in, and who's a reliable witness.
So would Matthew be a Reader's Digest version? Or does
Oh
he,
yeah, in part, yeah. He's shortening down some of these stories. He's editing them out. He's got a pocket full of stuff, and he's ferreting it down. There are. This is a little book. There are 21 Gospels in this book. And only 4 of them made it into our canon. Now, some of them were very, very late in being written. And so they weren't really even considered in the early dialogues. But there were communities in Alexandria, they probably had 4 or 5 books that they were following in their Sunday worship. But they eventually tossed out by the 4th century and said, okay, this was fun to worship with, but it's not really integral to what we believe.
So we've done that though. We've taken the King James version and we've made it into the Revised Standard and we've made other revisions, but are we searching for the truth or are we just trying to make words more reasonable?
Well, I'm going to say this. So there's 2 approaches. There are translations. So like the Revised Standard Version, the RSV Bible, came out in the 1950s, and it was saying we're going to start with the Greek and the Latin, and we'll come up with a gospel that makes sense to 20th century readers, because most of our readers don't understand Shakespeare anymore, let alone the King James Version. So the King James Version was intended to be written in the language that was common in 16th century, 17th century England. So they have phrases in there that you and I don't completely understand anymore. They use language that isn't all there. So, you know what, Mary was great with child. You mean she's pregnant? Okay? Yeah. So, yeah. There are also transliterations. And that's the Living Bible, the Good News Bible, Bibles like that. They don't look at Greek or Hebrew or Latin. They just look at the English in the RSV and say, well, let's make it a little bit more friendly for people to understand in English. And so they just change the English language a little bit to be more like our conversations.
Yeah, I really think you get into trouble, because when you're doing translations, there's not equivalencies. And
Right.
you often have to choose between what's correct and what is more smooth.
Yes.
And to me, I get really frustrated when we choose what is more smooth and colloquial, when we really lose the meaning. I personally would rather have something that sounds a little bit awkward,
Yeah.
but is a whole lot more correct.
Yes, that's right.
But that's the choices that, that we
These
gotta-
editorial committees have to make those choices, and yeah, that's right. I mean,
It's like the Bible written in rap.
Right,
what's that?
The Bible written in rap.
Yeah,
yeah.
Is
yeah.
there
I'm sure there is one. If not,
I'm sure there is.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know.
Say paraphrase right in the, under the title?
Sometimes they do say paraphrase,
Okay,
and when they do, they're being completely honest.
yes, yeah.
But it's sort of like in
Report
small
to us
print, and
tomorrow.
it's like, okay, but I like this version of the
Sure,
Bible.
this makes me feel better.
Yeah, yeah.
What was Eugene Peterson's The Message?
Oh, that was his own. That was his own translation. He
Okay.
did go back to his own reading of Greek,
Yes,
I'd like
but
to
he,
compare those.
yeah, the message.
yeah.
But yeah, he's trying to put it. He's trying to do both. His own Greek translation, and then, but translated into English that he likes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't there a school of thought that thinks Latin is the original, most important biblical language, and we always go back to the Latin versions?
Well, that's Roman Catholic. Jerome's Bible is Jerome's Bible is the Bible.
Because it's Latin based.
Yeah, because it's Latin based. He's the first to translate the texts, both Hebrew and Greek, and translate them into Latin, which was the Roman Empire.
Right.
Yeah.
Would there be any similarities to what we're going through in our current status with what Matthew was going through? Like when we had the big pull to take every reference of sex out of the Bible, would somebody in Matthew's era have thought about the definition of of things as well, or?
Well, so, yes. So one of the interesting stories that I can tell you is that for instance, the story of the adulterous woman that Jesus forgives. Every translated Bible will usually have a footnote that say some people think this story belongs in Luke, and some people believe this story belongs in John. And the truth is, we have a number of translations that can date to ancient times, and some of them are included in Luke, some of them included in John, and some of them leave it out altogether. Since then, what we've concluded is that there were rich men who were making gifts of Bibles to their daughters. And so they would go to the monks and they would say, yes, give me a complete translation of the Gospel of John, but leave out this story about the adulterous woman. I don't want my daughter getting any wrong ideas that Jesus is forgiving adultery.
Wow.
And so it gets passed on without that story in it. So yes, that has happened from time immemorial, right? Everybody, everybody wants to clean up the act, and I don't know a time when we didn't want to clean it up.
But the truth is, people were a mess.
Yes. Yes.
Still
Still
are.
are.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. So
Fatal attraction.
let me quickly go back to Matthew.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
So
Easy.
let's see. I've got this. So this is the icon in the Orthodox Church, Saint Matthias, the additional apostle. The Eastern Orthodox are convinced that Matthew was not the original disciple. He was the 13th one who was elected in the book of Acts. Judas. Matthew, by the way, is the only gospel writer that tells us that Judas, after Jesus is sent to be crucified, Judas goes out and commits suicide. Matthew is the only one who tells us that. Luke tells us in the book of Acts a different story, that Judas was just so full of evil that he burst open in the middle of a field, and that field became a field of blood, and they became a potter's field where you buried people with no funds to be buried. And that's what Luke tells us in the book of Acts. So Luke likes good supernatural stories. So
Yes.
the evil just burst open. Anyway, that's Matthew. This is the ancient church of Alexandria. You can see the Mediterranean Sea in the background. We just found this literally 30 years ago, and so we are in the midst of digging it out. The original Christian church in Alexandria, which archaeologists have now dated to around 300 AD. We know there was a community before that, but they probably couldn't afford a building for a couple hundred more years. And this is the present day Alexandrian Christian church, which is Eastern Orthodox. You can see the Orthodox cross on the top of the tower, the bell tower. You can see how Trinitarian it is. The three, yes. And all of these saints. I believe this is Saint Mark on the side here. Yeah. And then chapter 13, Matthew in chapter 13 begins to talk less about who Jesus is and begins to talk more about what it means to be his church, what it means to be his followers. And he starts it out with this parable, the parable of the sower, who throws his seed out hither and yon. Throws it out on the road, on the path, on rocky soil. He throws it out in the midst of weeds, and somehow once in a while he manages to throw it out on good soil. So people often don't realize that Van Gogh was a man of faith. We just think of him as being crazy and cutting off his ear, but he understood that he was writing about the life of faith, or drawing, painting the life of faith. He considered himself rocky ground. And notice that he includes in his story the city way back here, the home, and in the center of it, the sun. This is Van Gogh's attempt at saying something about the Trinity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Okay, I can't tell you everything that was in Van Gogh's mind, but yeah. So Matthew will include he'll do two parables where he includes not just a parable, but he'll get around to 8 or 9 verses later. He'll explain it all. Hear then the parable of the sower, he has Jesus saying in 13:18. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches it away. What is sown in the heart, this is what was sown on the path. And the birds came and ate it. That's the evil one. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet such a person has no root and endures only for a while. And when trouble or persecution arises on account of the word, that person immediately falls away. And as for what was sown among thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of this age and the lure of wealth choke the word, and it yields nothing. But as for what is sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bear fruit and yields in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and in another 30. If you, or at all in a farm, understand a farm culture, first century, farmers believed if they got 25% more than the seeds they threw out, that was a good harvest. So 160-30 is more than average.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like Wobegon, where all the children are above average. Yes. Yes. He does the same thing with the parable of wheat and tares. And you notice how similar the two are. This is a tare, and this is wheat. You can see the kernels of grain. This one doesn't have any kernels, but it sure looks a whole lot like the wheat.
The imposters.
I know. Exactly. This is why, this is the point of the parable that we don't often get anymore. And we think, well, in my garden, I sure know the weeds from the good stuff. I know the weeds to pull out of there.
Sometimes it's hard.
But this, and that's why Jesus says, no, leave it to God. Pull everything and leave it to God to sort it out.
Wow.
Yeah.
A Lutheran song is going through my mind right now. The good soil and the wheat and the, yep.
Yeah. So I put down a couple of these stories that are unique to This is the separation of the sheep and the goats. Only Matthew tells this story. You can see the goats over here and the sheep over here. Christ, this is 1100 AD, but still he is portrayed by that Italian culture, that Roman culture that's left. Jesus has no beard, and he still wears Caesar's haircut. So, this is
Maybe.
yeah. This is the sheep and the goats.
I don't think so, but
A unique story to Matthew.
Every doll says soon over this time.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, yeah, and yeah. These are the parting of the waters of chaos behind him. Yeah, yeah. Interesting mosaic. A couple other stories that we know about. We know about the laborers in the vineyard, and that's only Matthew. The unforgiving servant, the rich young man who comes and can't give away his goods, and so walks away dejected. And the wise and foolish bridesmaids. Those are all parables that Matthew knows about and includes in his gospel that aren't included by any of the other writers. When we get to the Passion, it's interesting. Matthew is criticized often for being the most sympathetic to Pilate, and that the thought, a lot of scholars thought that that Matthew was sort of bowing to Roman authority and giving them a passion story that kind of lets them off the hook. This is Christ, and again, this is 1496. This is Renaissance painting, and all these guys are wearing Renaissance hats, including Pilate, who clearly did not wear a Renaissance hat.
Wrapped around his head.
That's kind of silly.
Nor would he have had a beard. As a good Roman soldier, he would know that he could not be wearing a beard.
But Jesus doesn't have a beard. And he has a funny halo.
Jesus does have a beard. Yep.
Oh, a short one? Okay.
So this is,
Yeah, I guess he does.
yeah, this is Renaissance, and they're trying to get, by the Renaissance, they're trying to get a little bit more realistic about Jesus. You have Da Vinci, who was actually using Jewish models when he painted Jesus, which was a whole new concept to artists. A Jewish Jesus. Who would have thought of it? Yeah.
Well,
Just because he
He
was
was.
born there.
So, the scholars used to say that Pilate washes his hands is a sign that that Matthew wanted to let Pilate off the hook. I don't think they understand Matthew when they say that. Matthew, I think, is the hardest on the Romans and the Romans who and their place in the death and crucifixion of Jesus. In Matthew's telling of the story, Pilate washes his hands, calls out to the crowd, and says, "So the blood of Christ is on you and your children." And they call back, "His blood be on us and on our children." That was considered, even as late as 1998, when Mel Gibson did his Passion of the Christ movie. Everybody wanted that edited out when he put it in. So he got around his producers, Mel Gibson did, by including the line in Latin and not translating it on the screen. But he left it in. And that's because Matthew understands that line to be the salvation of people. It is on those of us who have the blood of Christ, we are the ones who are saved. So let Christ's blood be on us and on our children, because we want to be saved. Whereas Pilate has rejected the grace of Christ. He's rejected the truth of Christ. And by washing his hands, he has shoved Christ out of his life entirely. So, yeah. Matthew uses a lot of irony in the way he writes about the passion and resurrection of Jesus. We never read chapter 27, the end of chapter 27. I've got it here at the bottom of page 2. We never read that. It's not a lectionary reading. Where would you read it? You read it on Good Friday? I don't know. It says the next day, that is after the day of preparation, which is the day in Passover when you're getting everything ready for the Passover Seder. After the day of preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees gathered before Pilate, and they said, "Sir, we remember what that impostor said while he was still alive. After 3 days I will rise again. Therefore, command the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise his disciples may go and steal him away and tell the people he's been raised from the dead. And the last deception would be worse than the first." Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers. Go, make it as secure as you can." And so they went with the guard and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone.
You said we don't hear about that?
What's that?
You said we don't hear that story?
Not very
I read
rarely
it.
do we read it. It's never in the lectionary.
Okay.
It's
Why?
just not a story.
Why do they leave
I
it
don't think
out?
anybody knows quite what to do with that story. I've preached it a couple of Easters just because I thought it was so interesting. And
I don't see anything objectionable about it.
No,
I
there's
don't
not.
see.
No, there's not. It just it stands by itself. Okay, there's nothing like it in Mark and Luke and John. So therefore, everybody's a little bit leery of it. But I think it makes perfect sense with Matthew's theology, anyway. And then, you have all these. You have this again Renaissance painting, Piero della Francesco, and this is the resurrection. And here's the guard who were set to secure the tomb, and you see they've all fallen asleep. In fact, in chapter 28 it says this: while they were going, some of the guard, this is the guards, leaving the tomb after the women have already been there. So while they were going, some of the guard went into the city and told the chief priests everything that had happened. After the priests had assembled with the elders, they devised a plan to give a large sum of money to the soldiers, telling them, "You must say, his disciples came by night and stole him away while we were asleep. If this comes to the governor's ears, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble." So they took the money and did as they were directed, and this story is still told among the Judeans to this day. Matthew describes it as when the angel of the Lord came to the women at the tomb, the soldiers became like dead men. They collapsed. And I also like that you know, that this painting continues to have Jesus with blood coming from the spear in his side. And this is again, Piero della Francesca wants us to understand that the risen Christ is flesh and blood. He's not an apparition. He's not a ghost. He's flesh and blood.
You could still see the wounds on his hands.
Yep.
On my foot.
Which Thomas would later make note of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey,
All right.
I like proof. Proof is
Yeah. Yeah, and then this is my last painting. So this is the Eastern Orthodox icon, 900 AD. It was painted. This is the Great Commission, which was the last 4 or 5 verses of Matthew's Gospel. Jesus meets his disciples on the mountain in Galilee, a very stylized mountain, and gives them a great commission to go out to all the world. And these are the disciples. These guys' halo are indistinguishable, but they're there. St. Peter, St. Paul, St. Simon, St. Andrew, St. James, and St. John. Look at St. John, he's a baby face.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that painting?
St. Paul.
Yeah, Paul wasn't there. Paul was never there. That happened much later. Yeah. But the church says
And there's some
Paul is one of
missing.
those who went out and told.
And
And
there's
just
some that
let-
are missing.
What's that?
There's some that are missing.
Yes, right. There
Not
are.
only did he include Paul, but there's other
Right.
guys who are on, I don't know,
Right.
on the other side
Are
of
we
the
missing
mountain.
women? They're in the back room.
Well,
No, and that's interesting too, because in Luke and Acts, Mary, the mother of Jesus, is there. Yeah. And yeah, she's there on Pentecost, on Sunday, when the flames descend upon the disciples. It also descends upon Mary. So, yeah. The only thing I can say is I think that this icon painter is wanting to keep the painting to a reasonable size so it doesn't take up, you know, the whole of your living room.
Okay.
Yeah.
They told me I could only
What-
do it
Yeah.
by 12.
But you know,
Rob,
again, yeah.
what are the, in the halo on Jesus, what are those letters or symbols or
yes,
numbers? Or?
yes, they are Greek letters,
Okay.
which means Jesus Christ victorious.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Don't we see those on pulpits?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we see that sometimes on pulpits.
Or,
We, you know, in the Eastern Orthodox Church, they stamp that on the bread before you take communion bread. Jesus Christ victorious. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. These are all disciples, though, who started early churches. James in Jerusalem, John in Ephesus, Simon out in the desert of just around Egypt. Saint Andrew, who supposedly started a church in India, and Saint Peter in Rome, and Saint Paul everywhere else. Everywhere else. Yeah. Yeah. But I think that's just giving us of the 6, and you know, trying to find the other 7 or 8 and identifying them with a specific church is a little bit more difficult.
So did Matthew live in a safe society? Did he travel like a vagabond like Jesus did? Or was he fairly comfortable in feeling that he could write what he wanted to write without fear of retribution?
I think he did. I think, yes, the second part. He was fairly safe in Alexandria. He understood that community was going to protect him. He didn't have to write in code, you know, his community would support him and protect him. Alexandria would eventually give birth to St. Augustine, became the bishop in Hippo, Alexandria was a very stable place until the fire destroyed half the city, including its great library. So Matthew would have considered himself pretty safe. Mark, on the other hand, Mark knows that, you know, as word gets out, he's endangering his life and the life of some of the others that he's talking about. Mark is trying to write to Christians in Rome, and Christians in Rome have to keep their faith under wraps. You know, both John and Luke would have felt more safety in numbers, like Matthew, but Mark is the most. Mark's gospel. That's one of the reasons why it's the shortest. I mean, you can read Mark's gospel in 2 hours. In fact, it's been a Broadway play off and on for the last 40 or 50 years as a 2-hour play. An hour and 15 minutes, intermission, then the Passion.
But he certainly wasn't in prison like Paul was, and his life wasn't going to be on the chopping block anytime soon, or did he still have to be somewhat?
I think he had to be somewhat careful. I think there's evidence that suggests John Mark was able to visit Paul in prison. Paul's prison time still remains a little bit of a mystery to historians, because Paul seems to be the most well cared for prisoner in all of the Roman prison system.
But all these writings seem to come out of prison, it would seem.
Well, all these writings are being passed on in an underground railroad, if you will, to one community or the other. They're not. Nobody's putting them in the front window and saying, "We've got the Gospel of Mark."
Because Paul wouldn't be able to have a scroll that he could write things in prison, would he? I mean,
he wrote letters.
What we think is he was able to be visited by Luke, and he dictated his letters, and Luke wrote them down. Luke brought in his pen and paper, and no doubt he bribed the guards. You know, here, I got a fresh salmon for you here, and
just let me walk out with the scroll and.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
The
It's
other
just a
writers who
scroll.
wrote,
What's that?
the other writers who wrote Paul's name, or
Yeah, there were other writers who wrote in Paul's name, and there are other writers. We don't. For instance, we don't have any idea who wrote the Book of Hebrews. The only thing we're really sure of is it wasn't Paul. But the early fathers put Hebrews in with all the other writings by Paul, for lack of, we don't know who wrote it. So we'll just say Paul wrote it.
But because Paul had to get word from, say, Luke what was going on, because why would he write a letter to Ephesus if he didn't know what was going on? In that community, who kept him apprised of?
Most likely, people are writing to Luke. Yeah. When we know, like for instance in Corinthians, the letters of Corinthians, we know that there have to be 7 or 8 letters that came from the church in Corinth to Paul. We just don't have a record of them. We can read between the lines and see this was likely the question they were asking Paul, because here's the answer he gave. Okay, that makes sense. One of the things he's criticizing them about is the way that they practice communion. All the rich Christians come in, eat all the good food, before everybody else is getting off work. And so when the workers go through the potluck line, all that's left is what everybody else didn't like. And Paul says, "What are you doing?" You people don't even know how to eat together. So, we can infer on that there was a question about how to eat together.
Would Matthew be like a James
So-
Patterson, or I mean, how popular would he have?
James Patterson.
I just, I don't know.
Yeah, honestly, I think all of these guys, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were, they were bestsellers in second, third, fourth centuries. In the same way that even today, the Bible outsells any other book in the world. And we just don't hear anything about it anymore, but it still sells more copies than any other book.
They were instrumental on how our civilization evolved.
Yes.
Very,
Yeah.
very much so.
Yeah, that's right. And that's it. They, these stories. One of the points I was trying to make today a little bit was that, all these stories, they show up in our cultural stories. They show up in our movies and TV programs. We're no longer attuned to find them because I don't think some of our younger generation have really found them. Although again, I'm going to say this. Word is out that young men, 22 to 30, is the largest growing group of converting Christians than anyone else in the United States.
Excuse me,
Yes.
are they converting to Christianity or are they converting to nationalism?
Christian nation.
Well, I don't know about
Right.
about the numbers in nationalism, but I do know that they are converting to Catholicism. That they are
Yeah,
that
that's
they are
where
becoming.
the biggest numbers are.
Yes,
Yeah.
they're
That's
they're
interesting.
actually in the Catholic Church.
And I heard Eastern Orthodox as well.
Yeah, that's true. I've heard that as well.
Yeah.
Again, it's interesting to me that in an age that we've tried to we've almost intentionally tried to wipe away rites and rituals. The younger generation is saying, wait a minute, I need this ritual in my life.
Exactly.
I need something like
Yes.
that. And,
Has anybody from the Latter-day Saints come to your house and knocked on your door?
yes, of course.
And
Yeah.
Yes,
How
many
did that
times.
go?
And a couple of times when I was really young, I tried to argue with them.
Yeah.
And I have since learned that is to no avail.
Just about.
Because they'll come back in a couple of days.
That's it. You say, yeah, they did it when we were living in New Jersey, and I was still saying, yes, I'm a student at the seminary. I said, well, let me tell you the real story of Jesus Christ. It's like, okay, there we go.
Oh my.
You just show up naked when you enter the door.
Back up.
You better be sure who's on the other side before you do that.
I had some woman when I was first retired from Latter-day Saints coming pretty regular, and I would chat with her about stuff. But then as soon as the Presbyterian Church changed the definition of marriage, and I told her that I was Presbyterian and that was the new thinking, she never came back.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I tell them up front. I'm churched. I just get,
Yeah, it was a buzzkill, and I toured Salt Lake City a number of years ago. Well, my son and husband went off, danger skiing. And so I'm walking around Temple Square, and we're following the tour guide. It's this lovely young Mormon woman, long skirt, the whole thing. And she's showing us all the, Brigham Young's home and the beehive, and then this voice in the back says, just how many wives did Brigham Young have anyway? And over here we just didn't hear that
If
one.
if you think this picture with all 16 disciples would be big, a picture of Brigham Young and all his wives would be way much bigger. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so, Yeah, just gotta know what to say.
Yeah. Well, listen, you guys are a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.